It's a Friday episode of Locked On Grizzlies, and it's a Jaren Jackson Jr. day, at least part of the conversation. We're going to focus on Jaren's contract decision, how Ja Morant may or may not be able to help in that process, how to get Jaren more money in the here and now. And we'll end the show talking about Scotty Pippen Jr. I feel like I haven't had a chance to fully articulate where I see Scotty moving forward. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It's Friday. You know what that means. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, it is Friday. You have got to get down. You, dear listener, dear viewer, you got to get down on Friday. It is fun. Looking forward to the weekend, as the wise philosopher Rebecca Black once said. I am so happy to be partying with you on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host, Joe Mullinax. No to Michael Cole, getting a nice long weekend in. Happy to be here in his stead, in his place, talking with you for the next 30 minutes or so about Memphis Grizzlies basketball here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, YouTube. Literally anywhere you get a podcast, you can get Locked On Grizzlies. Make DeMichael and I a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. Hopefully you are an everydayer already, checking us out each and every day here on Locked On Grizzlies. And if you're not, if this is your first time around these parts of the internet, thank you so much for hanging out with me and with us, and hopefully you'll stick around. I'm not going to talk about the NBA Finals because Adam Silver makes me mad. If you're an everydayer of the show, you follow my work, you know I am not a big fan of Adam Silver. I have said on numerous occasions, and I truly believe it. It's not just a bit. It's not me trying to elicit anger on the interwebs. I think that Adam Silver is the worst commissioner in professional sports. I truly feel that, and the coverage of the finals was further confirmation of that for me. How more energy is put into the stupid in-season tournament to make that feel unique, to make that feel special. If you were somebody that's a casual fan tuning in to watch the NBA for the first time this season because it was game one of the NBA Finals, how in the hell would you have known that there was an NBA Finals game going on? I'll tell you how, by looking at the little bitty sign on the stanchion near the shot clock. That was it. Nothing on the court, nothing to designate this being an important game, aside from obviously television graphics. But the television graphics are a fleeting moment. The actual game that is being played on the court, there's no way to notice that this was a special event. Because Adam Silver is the worst commissioner in professional sports, and he focuses on things like dumb in-season tournaments. But I already talked more about the NBA Finals than I wanted to. We've talked a lot about this week. I want to focus a lot of our energy today on Jaren Jackson Jr. Some good pieces have come out. Matt Hardlicka, who I've talked about several times here on the podcast. Great Patreon page that you should subscribe to if you don't already do so. Former colleague of mine over at SB Nation's Grizzly Bear Blues. Matt wrote about Jaren's contract, and it got me rekindled in that thought process. And I do have some things I want to talk and get off my chest with on this solo version of Locked On Grizzlies here on this Friday. And I want to lead off with the idea of Jaren potentially kicking the can down the road, hoping that he can get that super max extension next year, right? Because obviously if Jaren does not sign an extension this summer, if that doesn't happen, and that's certainly possible, if that doesn't occur, that means that he is placing a bet on him being named All-NBA or winning Defensive Player of the Year next year, so he's eligible for that Supermax contract. That's an interesting bet. Not because he was so close this season, right? He finished 17th. There were 15 spots. He finished 17th. He was 2 away. The question becomes, how realistic is it, given health, given other players getting healthy, right? There are several names that were not eligible for All-NBA that may be All-NBA eligible next year. There's a lot of variables in play. that could make Jaren earning those accolades, the fact that Victor Wembanyama exists on the Defensive Player of the Year side of things. All of those issues can kind of coalesce in one spot and suggest Jaren betting on himself may not be the best idea. But those are factors outside of his control. Something that is more so in line with his control, or at least within the control of the organization that employs him and theoretically will be offering him this extension, is the existence of Ja Morant. And it's kind of a oxymoron, catch-22, however you want to phrase it. Ja Morant being healthy, and Ja Morant being on the court, and Ja Morant being the number one offensive option for the Memphis Grizzlies, which he is more than capable of being when he is available. That theoretically should make Jaren's life easier, right? Jaren should have more open looks. Jaren should have more isolation opportunities when teams are concerned about trying to control what Ja Morant does. However, if Ja is Ja, and Morant goes out there and does the things that he's capable of, and the Memphis Grizzlies are a top 3 or 4 seed in the Western Conference, who is going to get the most love for all NBA votes? Jaren Jackson Jr. or Ja Morant? It's an interesting question. Is it a situation where the vote could be diluted because there are multiple all-NBA competitive pieces in the fold? Ja Morant was a dark horse all-star candidate this season with the games that he missed and with the struggles that he had at times on the court. Ja was still in the conversation for some all-star voters, especially because of his popularity in the NBA with fans. So all-star and all-NBA are two different things, but that's just one example of how, okay, do the Grizzlies really need 2 all-stars? They've had it before, of course. Expand that now. Do the Grizzlies really deserve 2 all-NBA players? And if Ja is playing at the level that he's capable of, won't Ja get that attention before Jaren? Now, maybe you know ball, and you completely understand that Jaren Jackson Jr. is a better basketball player in the here and now than Ja Morant is currently. It doesn't surprise you outside of the eligibility question with Ja not playing enough games. But even if Ja had played enough games, Jaren was a better player this season. But Ja has the accolades. Ja has the history. Ja has the flashier game. And for a market like Memphis, where the attention may not always be there in terms of that truth being truthful, how the perception of the Grizzlies evolves over these next several months, especially assuming that Ja is able to stay on the court, is going to be fascinating to watch. So yeah, a healthy Ja Morant means more offensive opportunity for Jaren without being the attention of the opposing scheme. But if Ja is able to develop more of a mid-range game, if Ja can turn down the turnovers a little bit, if Ja can grow not just his minutes and his games played, but the concepts around what he brings to the basketball court, does that hurt Jaren's ability to get that big-time contract that he wants? I don't think that's true of Desmond Bane. Des hasn't made an all-star game yet, much less all-NBA. I don't think that needs to be a concern for Jaren in terms of, well, if Des has a better year, that's going to hurt me. Ja Morant, that absolutely could be a concern. And I don't think Jaren is sitting around stewing about it. I don't think he's mad. But I do think it's part of the decision-making process. You have to weigh your options. And it sounds all well and good to bet on yourself. I'm going to bet on myself. I know I can do it. Hot dang. Good for you, Jaren. But what is the reality? There's only 15 of these spots across the entire National Basketball Association. And as long as guys like Nikola Jokic and Giannis and Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as long as those guys are healthy, we know Jason Tatum won't be in that mix this coming season. But you never want to wish or bet on injury for anybody. And if that is the thought process, and that means Ja Morant is playing the 65-plus games required to be eligible for these honors, could the ballot be split? The significance and the impact of the Grizzlies, and could that cost Jaren tens of millions of dollars? Hit me up on X. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling about Jaren's contract choice. Am I overanalyzing? I've been guilty of that before. I've been accused of that. Am I overthinking it? Who cares if Ja comes back bigger and better than ever? Obviously, that would be in the best interest of the Grizzlies, but would it be in the best interest of Jaren? That's the question that I'm posing. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will be discussing a way to maybe squash some of those fears and get Jaren as much money as we can, or as much money as the Grizzlies can, I should say. It ain't my money in the here and now. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. I love FanDuel. I'm sure you do as well. The NBA Finals are in full swing. Every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Maybe you think that SGA or Tyrese Halliburton are going to heat up. Back it up with the same game parlay, and you could take your first $5 bet if it hits and turn it into $200 in bonus bets. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the National Basketball Association. So the renegotiate and extend thing has been talked about a lot, right? We've talked about it here on Locked On Grizzlies. I know Keith Parrish over at Grits and Grinds has talked about it. Lots of different folks have discussed this idea of the Grizzlies with working with salary cap space, being able to renegotiate, being able to go out and develop payment plans that allow for them to extend Jaren in the here and now without the all NBA selections that he's garnered and without that capacity to be able to really kind of lean into this hope that he would get these accolades to access the Supermax. We can be honest sitting here together and say that Jaren Jackson Jr. isn't a Supermax player. I think that I understand how basic economics works. And if it's free market economy, baby, you are worth what the market says you're worth. But at the same time, the NBA isn't true capitalism, of course. There's a salary cap. There's limitations in terms of 35% of that salary cap being offered to any given player. And Jaren placing that bet that he is worth that deal, whether it's to Memphis or to somebody else, might be a bit of a stretch at this time. But what isn't a stretch if the Grizzlies want to try to meet Jaren in the middle? Because that's certainly a leverage play that Jaren Jackson Jr. should pull. Why would I sign an extension now? I was 2 spots away from all NBA. I have more money that I'm leaving on the table if I take that extension in this moment. The Grizzlies could tip their cap to Jaren. And again, Matt Hardlicka, Patreon page, he wrote about this. And I've thought of this as well. Although my logic is not clear, I will be honest. There are ways to free up money for Jaren to do that renegotiate and extend and build up that last year of his current deal so that his next extension is worth more in terms of base finances. You can renounce salary cap holds. Of course, the Grizzlies have free agency holds on players like Luke Kennard, Marcus Bagley. That's one way to get there. They won't renounce Santi Aldama because that's a trade piece, whether they re-sign Santi and keep him, or they can do a sign and trade and restricted free agency. So they won't renounce the cap hold on Santi. Luke and Bagley, that feels like a sure thing almost at this point. But another thing that they could do, and I would personally advocate for this, is trade John Konchar. If you are someone who has been with this show, you know that that probably isn't a surprise to you that I would want to trade John Konchar, because I am not the biggest John Konchar fan. I think it's fair to say. I don't know John as a person, so I want to stress that. This is a basketball take. But we're talking about someone who this past year, 118.1 points per shot attempt according to Cleaning the Glass. That's pretty good for wings. But his usage rate is 8.3%, or it was 8.3% this past season. And that is among the very lowest for players that logged minutes as wings in the National Basketball Association this past year. And that's not why you bring John Konchar into the fold. He's a Swiss Army knife kind of guy. I get it. He defends relatively well, has good stocks percentages, steals, and blocks. He's an excellent rebounder, an elite rebounder as a wing. So Konchar is an NBA basketball player. Not trying to make it seem like, excuse me, that he isn't. But what John Konchar does over the next couple of years is make too much money, at least to me. He makes $6.2 million this coming season. $6.2 million with an M dollars. So let's say the Grizzlies renounce those two cap holds of Bagley and Kennard. That puts them at over $41 million freed up in terms of cap holds. They can find themselves in a place where if they trade away John Konchar, they are in a spot where they have more money to be able to renegotiate and extend Jaren. And that makes the 4-year deal that Jaren would likely sign bigger in terms of its overall worth. It wouldn't be Supermax option because he hasn't earned the Supermax option. But it would be more than what Jaren could currently be paid on that descending deal. Matt talked about it, and I have thought about it myself, partially because I just like to dream up John Konchar trades. But if you want to take John Konchar and say the second round pick Memphis has, 56, I believe it is, in this coming draft later on this month. You want to take those two and you want to trade it for a future heavily protected first round pick that becomes 2 seconds down the road. Or you want to move up higher in the second round of this draft to somebody that has multiple picks and to somebody who could use a high rebounding, low usage wing, regardless of how much money he makes. Whether it's a future asset or something in this upcoming draft, it allows for you to clear up multiple more millions of dollars, and it puts you in a position to show Jaren Jackson Jr. that you value him. You understand the disappointment that he surely feels not being named All-NBA. The reality setting in that he's almost certainly not going to get it before the end of this contract. It's possible. Could Jaren make another big leap and have a monster season? Yeah. But a lot of things have to go right for Jaren. And I think you could pretty easily argue that would mean that some things are going wrong for the Memphis Grizzlies, like Ja Morant getting hurt again. If the Grizzlies are trying to compete for a championship, or at least to be in a better spot to compete, they need Ja Morant. And as we talked about earlier in the show, that might negate some of what Jaren brings to the table, especially offensively. So the All-NBA window might be closing. But you also want to acknowledge the greatness that Jaren has brought to your team over these last couple of years. Jaren has been in Memphis, 7 seasons? Jaren was drafted in 2018. 2025 is here. Jaren is the longest tenured member of the Memphis Grizzlies. He has been a good soldier. He has been a wonderful representative of the organization. Where Ja Morant has fallen short at times, Jaren Jackson Jr. has not. Jaren is the vice president in the Players Association. Jaren does tremendous public works in terms of charity. Doesn't mean that Ja isn't charitable. Doesn't mean that Ja isn't active and trying to better his community. But if we're talking about a face of the franchise, Jaren Jackson Jr. has very much filled that role in the absence at times of Ja Morant admirably. You have to reward that somehow, even if it's not going to result in a supermax contract. So renouncing those cap holds and going a step beyond that and moving on from a John Konchar in exchange for maybe less on the dollar than what Konchar is worth in a trade. But it's not about Konchar as much as it is the ability to renegotiate and extend with Jaren. People can talk about his rebounding all they want. I talk a ton about Jaren's inability to pass and facilitate. He is an imperfect player. Most players are. All people are. What Jaren Jackson Jr. does as a homegrown Memphis Grizzlies talent is multiple skill sets at an elite level that guarantee you that if Jaren hits the open market, somebody's paying him. Somebody's going to pay him the money that the market dictates. Why not be the Grizzlies? Strengthen your position, grow that cap space now. See you later, John Conchar. Again, I'll admit it's not the most innocent of thoughts on my end. Let me know on X. Hit me up in the comments. How are you feeling about this idea to really prioritize getting Jaren more money in the here and now through whatever means necessary, including a John Conchar trade, so we can move on from this extension talk and the team can rebuild around Jaren, Ja, and Dez. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, closing out this Friday edition of the show, haven't talked a ton about Scotty Pippen Jr., at least I haven't. Got a couple of takeaways on him that I want to share with you to close out the week here on Locked On Grizzlies. Stick around. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, closing out this Friday edition of the show. Thank you so much for being with me wherever you're checking out the podcast. A lot of Jaren Jackson Jr. talk on this episode, and he is the biggest domino to fall this offseason. There's no doubt about that. But we haven't talked a ton about, or at least I haven't, talked a ton about DeMichael Cole's boy, my wonderful co-host, Scotty Pippen Jr. And Scotty Pippen Jr., I think you could argue pretty easily, is one of the best bargains in the NBA going into this offseason as the NBA Finals end here in the next week or two. Likely the Oklahoma City Thunder win that series. But Scotty Pippen Jr. making $2.3 million next season. Scotty Pippen Jr. with a partially guaranteed $2.5 million the year after that, and then a team option for $2.8 million. If you go and you look at how the Grizzlies have actually structured some of these contracts, they've done a wonderful job, whether it's Jalen Wells, Gigi Jackson, Pippen Jr., Vince Williams Jr. They really have put themselves in a spot where they have key contributors that have rotation-esque skill sets on low numbers. And Scotty Pippen Jr. coming out of that playoff series with the Oklahoma City Thunder is perhaps the best example of that, because look at what the Thunder were able to do to the Indiana Pacers. Look at the way that they disrupted what the Pacers do best. If you're a Grizzlies fan and you've watched these playoffs, you're not surprised. Nothing that you saw the Thunder do really is shocking. But what is surprising is how the Pacers were able to hang around and fight. What is surprising is how they were competing. And what is surprising is how they could find openings once they controlled possessions within their offense and to limit the way that the Thunder scored. Very few players in these playoffs gave Shai Gilgeous-Alexander the issues that Scottie Pippen Jr. did defensively. SGA gives everybody problems. He's the MVP for a reason. But Scottie Pippen Jr. has a defensive skill set where he can really cause trouble. And I think that we saw flashes of that in game one. OKC forces all of these turnovers in the first half. But once the Pacers settled in and made it a competitive game towards the end, controlling possessions, scoring the basketball, putting SGA in a blender, and trying to make those defensive choices more difficult, that is where Scottie Pippen Jr. really thrived in a tough matchup against the Thunder, one of the best NBA teams we've seen in modern history. Scottie Pippen Jr. as a scoring guard holds tremendous value. But one of my main thoughts and takeaways on Scottie is this idea of him as a scoring guard. Can he be a true backup point guard? And that makes me nervous. A few episodes ago, I did my perfect armchair GM trade. And I talked about McDaniels and Conley from the Timberwolves in exchange for Desmond Bane. And obviously that was kind of the backbone. There were other pieces of that deal. But one of the reasons I like that trade is because it brought a true backup point guard in Conley to the Memphis Grizzlies, somebody that could spot start when Ja can't be there. And of course, I'm a grit and grind guy. Bring it full circle, bring Mike home. But I have not concerns, because I think Scottie Pippen Jr. is a key important cog of this machine moving forward. That is the Memphis Grizzlies core. But I do have concerns that he can be a backup point guard for Ja the way that a Tyus Jones, not necessarily as a backup point guard, because I talk about that all the time. Tyus Jones is one of the best substitute teachers in the NBA when he was a member of the Memphis Grizzlies. But as a true backup, that's the question. And I have the same question about Scottie Pippen Jr. It has nothing to do with Scottie in terms of thinking he should play less or in terms of him not bringing value to this roster. I see Scottie as a combo guard. He's kind of like another coming of DeAnthony Melton. Scotty can play the point. He has experience doing that, but so many of his decisions at times were forced. He clearly wants to be a scorer of the basketball. Sometimes you got to let peacocks fly. Shout out to the other guys. Great movie. Sometimes you got to let these peacocks fly. And Scotty Pippen Jr. strikes me as a guy who, in the combo guard secondary facilitator, wants to put the ball in the bucket role. I like his energy there more than as a true backup point guard. And it's also hard to replicate what Ja Morant does, man. Ja is a phenomenal athlete. The way that he creates off the dribble and the steps that he's able to take, the space that he creates off of his athleticism, Scotty Pippen Jr. doesn't have that. In fairness, not very many people do. When you look at Scotty Pippen Jr.'s game, how much value does he have in that traditional backup point guard role? And if the answer is not as much as he does as a scoring guard, which is my opinion, how do you address the backup point guard position? I would address it in the way that I talked about, my armchair GM trade. But you got to look in free agency. Maybe it's in the draft. You have to put something together that allows for you to put Scotty Pippen Jr. in the best position to be successful. And that's true of coaching in general, right? As we learn more about Tuomas Isalo and his full-time coaching debut, not just as an interim tag trying to Freudian slip, trying to land a burning plane. How does Isalo put into effect the strengths of Scotty Pippen Jr.? That's an important question because that is going to be how Isalo is judged. Can he find the footing? Can he allow for Pippen Jr. to build off of what absolutely was a successful playoff performance? The Pacers were able to do some of the things that the Grizzlies did, at least in limited spurts, in that game one matchup. The Thunder had the advantage because of an explosive first half, the defense that they played. But the Pacers found some things that were working. Got that game pretty close. How does Memphis acknowledge the success that Scotty Pippen Jr. had against the Thunder? Reward that competitiveness, not necessarily with a new contract, right? He's under contract, but with a consistent role off the bench that best fits his skill set. Is it as a true backup point guard? I'm not sure it is. And if it's not as a true backup point guard, does that limit the future value to the Grizzlies of a Vince Williams Jr., of a G.G. Jackson? Probably not as much because he's a combo forward, different positions. A John Conchar, right? Talked about trading him. If you move on from Conchar, that obviously gives greater opportunity for a guy like Gigi, but it also enables you to find rotational spots a little bit more cleanly while also having the financial flexibility to re-sign Jaren, as we discussed, or to go use full mid-level exceptions, biannual exceptions. There's all sorts of different ways that the Grizzlies can float around building around this team. Scotty Pippen Jr. is worth building around. What's the best way to build around him? I think that's something that DeMichael and I can continue to kind of sink our teeth into as the offseason grinds along. Again, not saying Scotty Pippen Jr. can't play. He clearly can. He did a lot of good things in that series against the Thunder. He was one of the best players for the Grizzlies against the Thunder. But as game one got competitive down the stretch, I saw some stuff that the Pacers were doing that I was like, Scotty Pippen Jr. could do those things. How do you build upon that strong playoff showing? Is it as a true point guard? Is it as a combo guard? Does it matter? Let me know on X, at Joe Mullinax. Hit me up in the comments. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It's appreciated. Obviously, we head into the weekend now. On Monday, we'll check back in with the NBA Finals, see how things are going with Thunder Pacers. We will also continue to look down the roster, ways to save money, pieces that need to be built upon. Where is the depth? How all of it adds up as the draft rapidly approaches and the Grizzlies are able to start renegotiating with players like Jaren and Santi and others. Lots of ways to talk about this Grizzlies team in the days and weeks to come. And we'll continue that journey on Monday here on Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, YouTube. And make sure, now that you've made Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today, For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being with me here on this Friday. Thank you for being an everydayer. Hopefully, if this was your first time through, hopefully you're back with us on Monday. Thank you 1,000 times to Michael and I. Appreciate it. Until next time, have a great weekend. Continue to get down on Fridays, Grizzlies fans, and continue to make Locked On Grizzlies your first listen. See you.